The engines coughed first, then settled into a deep, uneven roar that rolled across the airfield like distant thunder. Morning mist clung to the concrete, and the smell of fuel hung heavy in the air. Mechanics stepped back instinctively as the massive four-engine aircraft began to move, its shadow stretching longer than any plane most of them had ever seen. In 1939, Japan stood at the edge of a wider war, and this machine, huge, experimental, and unproven, was meant to carry the empire's ambition across oceans. Inside a narrow Tokyo office, Commander Yoshio Komori of the Imperial Japanese Navy stared at American blueprints spread across his desk. English labels had been scratched out, replaced with sharp Japanese characters. The Douglas DC-3, an American airliner rejected by its own designers, had been quietly purchased, dismantled, and reborn on paper as something else entirely. This aircraft was meant to carry civilians, a junior officer said hesitantly, the ceiling fan ticking above them. It was unstable. Too complex. Komori's voice was calm, almost cold. America builds for comfort. We build for reach. Across the city, at Nakajima's Musashino factory, engineer Hiroshi Tanaka felt that reach pressing down on him like physical weight. The bomber's wings loomed overhead, supported by scaffolding and prayer. Rivet guns rattled, metal rang, and orders echoed through the hangar. The aircraft was enormous, far larger than any Japanese bomber before it. Four engines strained against their mounts. Fuel lines ran like veins through the fuselage. Every added system brought new problems. Tanaka wiped sweat from his brow and leaned close to another engineer. She's too heavy, he whispered. She must fly, came the reply. The Navy has already named her Shinzan. Mountain tremor. On the test field, Lieutenant Saburo Kato climbed into the cockpit, leather helmet pulled tight. He had flown fighters, nimble and sharp, but this felt different. The controls resisted him even before takeoff. Throttle up, came the order. The engines hauled. The bomber rolled forward, slowly, painfully, as if the earth itself was reluctant to let it go. Inside the cockpit, gauges shook. Vibrations crawled through the frame. She doesn't want to leave the ground, Kato muttered, then lift. The runway fell away. Men on the ground held their breath. The Shinzan was airborne. Cheers rose briefly, then faded as smoke curled from one engine. The aircraft climbed sluggishly, turning wide, vulnerable circles over the field. When it finally landed, tires screaming, the relief was mixed with dread. That night, Tanaka lay awake listening to distant trains and factory whistles. He knew what they had built was powerful in theory and fragile in reality. 2 years later, radios crackled with frantic voices across the Pacific, enemy aircraft approaching Oahu. At Pearl Harbor, carrier planes screamed out of the sky, bombs tearing open battleships and history alike. The war had begun, but the Shinzan was nowhere near it. While Zero fighters and dive bombers made headlines, Japan's heavy bomber dream remained grounded, plagued by engine failures and endless modifications. In the factory, Tanaka listened to the attack reports in silence. We were supposed to strike farther than anyone, he thought. Instead, others fly while we wait. By 1942, American pilots like Lieutenant James Red Miller were already learning how the war would be fought. On the deck of a U.S. carrier near Midway, he tightened his gloves as the sun rose. They say the Japanese have something big coming. A deckhand joked. Miller shrugged. Let them try. Back at Rabaul in 1943, rain hammered down on coral runways as ground crews struggled to keep a Shinzan operational. Its mission was no longer bombing, only transport and reconnaissance. The aircraft drank fuel at an alarming rate. Parts wore out faster than replacements could arrive. A mechanic slammed a panel shut in frustration. She's too much airplane for this war. The bomber lumbered into the sky, on a supply run, engines straining, disappearing into low cloud. It never came back. When the loss report reached Tanaka, he folded it carefully, hands trembling. Around him, the factory noises continued. Indifferent, for the first time, he allowed himself to think the unthinkable, that the mountain meant to tremble. The enemy might instead collapse under its own weight, long before it ever reached the battlefield. The sound came first high, distant, relentless. Not the uneven growl of the Shinzan's engines, but a smooth, confident hum that seemed to come from the sky itself. In 1944, American B-2 super fortresses appeared over Japan like steel omens. They flew higher than Japanese fighters could easily reach, carried bomb loads heavier than anything the Shinzan had ever been designed to lift, and returned again and again. From the rooftops of Tokyo, Hiroshi Tanaka watched silver shapes glide above the clouds, untouched by flak. This, he thought bitterly, is what a real heavy bomber looks like. Air raid sirens wailed. Firebombs fell. Entire districts vanished into flame. The borrowed dream that had once filled his notebooks now felt painfully small on a quiet airfield far from the burning cities. The remaining Shinzan aircraft sat motionless. Some had been stripped for parts to keep other planes flying. Others were hidden beneath camouflage nets, never to be used. Lieutenant Saburo Kato walked slowly around one abandoned airframe, running his hand along the cold aluminum skin. She was never given a fair war, he said to no one in particular. A young ground crewman looked up at him. Would it have mattered, sir? Kato did not answer. Across the Pacific, Lieutenant James Red Miller stood on the deck of a carrier, watching the horizon as Japan's defenses weakened. The enemy's air power no longer felt mysterious or distant. They tried to build something to match us, he said later. But war doesn't wait for late arrivals. By 1945, Japan's skies were empty of ambition and full of loss. Fuel was scarce. Pilots were fewer. Factories lay in ruins. Orders came quietly, without ceremony. Destroy what remains. Explosives were placed inside the Shinzan's fuselage. Men stacked back. A dull blast tore through the aircraft's frame, twisting wings that had never carried bombs in anger. Smoke drifted upward, thin and final. Tanaka watched from a distance, unable to look away. Years of word calculations, hopes, sleepless nights ended in seconds. When the war finally ended, silence replaced the sirens. In the aftermath, Allied troops walked through abandoned airfields, photographing strange, oversized wrecks. Miller paused beside the remains of a Shinzan, its shape unfamiliar and oddly sad. So this was their answer, he murmured. For Tanaka, survival came with reflection. He returned once more to the empty factory floor, now quiet except for the wind moving through broken windows. The bomber that was meant to shake continents had never found its purpose. The Nakajima G5N did not lose battles, because it never truly fought them. Its failure was quieter and perhaps more tragic. It was born from ambition without time, imitation without mastery. History would remember the aircraft only in footnotes, overshadowed by machines that changed the course of the war. Yet its story remained a wording written in aluminum and ash. Courage cannot replace preparation. Vision cannot outrun reality. And in war, the cost of reaching too far is often paid long before the enemy is ever seen.